Hi, everybody. Today's Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and our friend Laith Marouf is back with us from Beirut. Welcome back, Laith.
Great to be with you, Nima.
What's going on, Laith, in Syria? It seems that the city called Sueda is getting hit by Israelis. The fight is going on there. Looking at the city and the situation that Syria is in, how do you make sense of what's going on in Syria?
Well, it's very important to understand, the location we're talking about. Sueda is part of the Horan region. Horan region is a geographic region that encompasses the south of Syria, south of Damascus, all the way to most of the north of Jordan. Okay, and if people want to understand it, they need to look at topographic maps. Don't look at maps of borders and so on. So you can understand the natural region. And these are, Sueda is it means the blackened, blackened area, which there's a volcano there. And you can see from the satellite images all that black rock that covers it. That's what Sueda. And in Sueda, there's Jabal al Arab or Jabal al Druze. And this area of Sueda is mainly followers of the Druze sect of Islam, what is called unificationist Muslims. And the reason that it's being targeted is because the Sueda region and the Druze population of Jabal al-Arab area are one of the pillars of Arabic, liberation thought and Syrian unification thought. So the Syrian Great Revolt against French occupation was started in three locations: in Sueda, in the coast of Syria, and in Deir ez-Zor. So those three regions that people don't think are the kind of center of Syrian governance are actually the ones that usually drive the country, not the main cities. And that allows, if we look over history, always revolts in Syria come from these three regions, revolts against bad rule. And so the Wahhabis and the Zionists and the imperialists have a vested interest in breaking the will of the people of Sueda and the Druze Muslims, forcing them to, what we saw, for instance, over the last few days, those Wahhabi attacks on Sueda included purposeful desecration of monuments of the Syrian revolution, monuments and posters and so on that are commemorating Amir al-Atrash, the leader of the Syrian revolt. We saw also the Wahhabis purposefully attack Druze sheikhs and shaving their mustaches and then killing them, desecrating them. Those are all designed by the Zionists, the imperialists, and the Wahhabi tools of them to break the will of the Druze population and force them to call for basically aid from the Zionists. That's what they're trying to do. It's been now, more than 6 months since the fall of the Assad government. And up until now, the Druze of Syria are refusing to collaborate with the Zionists. And now we see all of this attack on the Druze is to force them to call for aid from the Zionists.
Laith, how do you see the way that maybe Turkey or Qatar is trying to interfere? Did they try to do anything with the government in Syria, or they're just sitting side and seeing what's going on there? And we know that Israel is actively they're attacking as I've mentioned, Sueda and other part of Syria. what Israel wants, what Turkey and Qatar want in Syria.
Yeah, I think it's all theatrics, right? So we look at the Al Jazeera coverage of what's happening in Sueda, and it's very anti-Druze, saying that the Druze are allied with Israel. Remember, the Wahhabis and Ikhwani agents of the United States and the Zionists in the region, with the fall of the Assad government, actually lost their fig leaf that covers their collaboration with Israel. So for years they were telling the Arabic population, the Sunni population, that the Assad government is collaborating with Israel, that it stops the attacks on Israel, all of those things, that is stopping the Sunni Muslims from liberating Syria so they can go into Palestine. And now what we have is, with the fall of the Assad government, it's been 7 months of everybody watching the Wahhabi government of HTS, of Al Julani, collaborating directly with the Israelis, and even just 2 days ago, meeting with the Israelis in Azerbaijan. So the Al Jazeera is now trying to portray the Druze population of Sueda, which is, again, one of the pillars of Syrian liberation and Arabic unification. These are people that call themselves Arabs, that call themselves Syrian before they call themselves Druze. And on the same time, we see the Israelis attempting to look like they are defending the Druze. So we saw a few attacks that the Israelis filmed of them hitting tanks of HTS that are trying to enter, Sueda. We don't know if that's true, if that's actually happened. But up until now, the population of Sueda is still refusing to collaborate with the Zionists, and there's no calls by any of the leaders of the Druze communities in Syria for interference on the side of Israel, or calling for Israel to aid them. And I would say the Druze population of Sueda is able to defend itself at this moment against the HTS. It doesn't need anybody. So in the end, this is all theatrics to give excuse to the Zionists to intervene in Syria, and HTS is providing that excuse.
The Druze population who are living in the territories controlled by Israel, is there any connection between the two? Is there any sort of mutual understanding? Do they have the same goal? Do we know about that?
So the Druze population inside the territories that the Zionists control are split into two parts. One is the Syrian Druze of the Golan Heights, which are patriotic Syrians till today, even with the fall of the Assad government, are refusing to take Israeli citizenship. They have been offered Israeli citizenship since 1967, and they refuse it. And then there's the Palestinian Druze population, which is split again in two parts, but the vast majority of their leadership being collaborationist with the Israeli regime. And we saw that manifesting today and yesterday with tens of Syrian Druze inside the Golan Heights carrying arms and breaching the fence that separates the occupied parts of the Golan from the rest of Syria, and entering into Syria to go fight to defend their brothers and sisters in Sueda. Those were not Palestinian Druze; these were Syrian Druze from the Golan Heights, and that shows you they don't want to be part of any Israeli military that intervenes in Syria. They want to be the ones that go to the aid of their extended relatives.
Does Israel see Druze as a problem, or they see something that they can manage it, they can somehow control it?
Well, the Druze of Syria, which are the largest section of Druze in the area, They're bigger population than the Druze in Lebanon or Palestine or Jordan. They are a big headache to the Zionists, the Wahhabis, the liberals, and the imperialists. Again, because they have this history, and they're proud of it. They're very proud of it, that the liberation of Syria from French rule wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Amir al-Atrash. Okay, he's the main leader of the Syrian revolt against French occupation, and this Palestinian Druze population has now become insignificant, in the hierarchy of the religious institutions of the Druze. And the Druze in Lebanon have always also been anti-Zionist. And we see right now the Druze in Lebanon, as they're watching the slaughter happen in Syria of their, their friends and families, they are getting more and more radical, re-radicalized. They used to be, the Socialist Party that's led by Jumblat in Lebanon used to be very active in the fight against the Israelis in the 70s and the 80s. Now it's become very, much more involved in politics than armed struggle. But we see right now a return to the activations of militias in the Druze communities here in Lebanon, because they want to defend themselves in the case of a situation of a Wahhabi or a Zionist attack on the country, because they can see clearly what the fate of their community would be if they're not able to defend themselves.
Laith, what's your take on the latest on the visit of Netanyahu to the United States? He talked with Donald Trump, but when it comes to the region, in your opinion, what the Netanyahu administration is asking for the from Donald Trump and the aid that the United States can provide them with?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there was at the top of the priority of Netanyahu's visit is the end of the Epstein file. And we saw that manifest immediately. Most probably Trump had to be reminded of what tapes they have on him. But the aspirations of Netanyahu to attack and destroy Iran and its military capabilities, or attack Lebanon and destroy Hezbollah completely, or Yemen, those are daydreams that the empire cannot deliver on. So no matter what Trump would like to do to appease Netanyahu and the Zionist and the Epstein ring that has all those tapes on him, there's nothing that he can offer without going to a world war or a nuclear war. And those are things that the United States will not be willing to do for Israel, because that's the end of humanity. Literally, this is what it means. There will be the end of the United States. So even if he would like to do something, Trump, especially as we saw his envoy Barak at the same time as Netanyahu was in Washington, he said in media here in the region, was threatening that HTS will attack Lebanon and take over Tripoli and the Beqa' Valley. And, those are clear indications of what the US wants to do. But HTS is still busy oppressing the local Syrian population and cannot govern the country. And as we see, if they would have attacked Lebanon while they still had Sueda out of control, it would have been, their back behind will be exposed. And this is part of what they're trying to do right now, to oppress and suppress the independence or revolution or, of Sueda. So in order to attack Lebanon. Now we see that this is impossible. So what can the US do? If the Wahhabi death squads cannot invade Lebanon, to achieve the goal that the US wants. The Israelis cannot attack Lebanon because they will get beaten up again. They can't attack Yemen, neither the US or Israel, and they can't attack Iran directly. So what we will see is the United States delivering on the low-hanging fruit for the Zionists, which is more sectarianism in Syria, possible sectarianism and terrorism in Iraq, possible terrorism attacks in Iran and Lebanon. But that's all. That's all they can do. That's not something that is not genocidal, but it's definitely not going to lead to the defeat of the enemies of the Zionists. And the Zionist colony is rapidly collapsing by itself.
Lace, what has happened with Israel, looking at the assassination of the leaders and all of this, they didn't gain, in my opinion, anything militarily when they went to the southern part of Lebanon to fight Hezbollah. And they asked for ceasefire, if you remember. And they attacked Iran, assassination, all of these things. This, or we can say this is somehow the terrorist act on the part of a government doing and managing all of these things, but nothing militarily and strategically comes in favor of Israel. Do you feel that the people in the United States or even in Israel, maybe in the region, the Arab states are recognizing what is happening to Israel? They're not gaining, I think, more than these assassinations. What's the outcome for Israel? If we assume that we put ourselves in the shoes of Israelis, in the shoes of these people who are running Israel in the Netanyahu administration, what is the outcome for them, in your opinion?
Yeah, look, the Zionists have been fighting militias or not states for a long time. And, you know, they think because militias are small, attacking the leadership and so on will have a great effect. But we've seen this play out for the last, 80 years in Palestine. And no matter how much of the leadership was killed, the movement birthed new leaders. So it was kind of crazy for them to think that something that didn't achieve any goals, attacking militias this way, that it will work in attacking a whole state that is 90 million people, that has institutions, that has an army, that's been active as is since independence in 1979 and the revolution. Iran will maybe, a few of those people that we were martyred, we lost some of their experience, but immediately there's somebody to replace them with their own experience, and they've probably learned from that person that just got assassinated their own experience added to theirs, and we'll have a different actually strategies coming out from this new generation of leaders. And that's actually bad for the Zionists, because when you have like an enemy that you have studied for 25, 30 years, you can start predicting their patterns, their behaviors, their ways of thinking. But when you have a new person in charge of a force and you don't have all of that history in front of you, there's a greater chance that you will have surprising events happening that you cannot calculate. So it's in a way just like the fall of the Assad government is turning out to be a blessing in disguise. We may think of those assassinations and the martyrdoms and the coming in of new leaders could be a blessing also in disguise for the axis of resistance.
What's going on with the capitulated Yemen? They have capitulated, and it doesn't seem that was so much in the way that Donald Trump was describing, was picturing this situation. Do when it comes to Yemen, it seems to me, Laith, that Yemen is one of the important factors in the whole calculation of Israel, that they cannot do anything with it. They couldn't do anything. Look at the way that they tried to fight Yemen with Saudis, with all these Arab states in the region, then back down. The United States comes in, and again, nothing comes out, and Israel is just continuing attacking, continuing attack the attacks on Yemen. What is I think there is a lot to learn from Yemen for the region, for those people who really feel to support uh, Palestine, to support Gaza. And do you see that the case of Yemen could somehow expose the ineffectiveness of Israel, the government in Israel, and the whole force against Yemen?
Over the last 24 hours, Yemeni armed forces fired multiple hypersonic missiles and drones on Ashrash or Eilat port in the south of Palestine, as well as the Israeli main bases in the Naqab Desert. So Yemen is continuing to target the Zionist, and all the shipping of every company that collaborates or works or delivers anything to Israel is now being targeted in the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea, the Indian Ocean. And the US is not doing anything about it. They don't want to the way that Yemen is targeting now the ships is more severe than it was before the confrontation between the US and Yemen. So that shows you that there is nothing that the US can do. And if it enters this war again with Yemen, Yemen will be more severe in its punishment and could sink aircraft carriers. So the Zionists are left with one choice of fighting this on by their own, by air, very expensive, and having Western aircrafts pretend that they're Israelis and fly from Djibouti and Somalia and the Gulf countries, all from airports that the Emiratis built in Somalia and Djibouti. Again, useless kind of war. You cannot change any realities on the ground in Yemen from the air. And this is why we saw over the last week the Saudis and the Emiratis attempting to re-trigger their assets on the ground in South Yemen to attack the north. And there was literally terrorist attacks on civilian markets in Yemen. And this gang that the Saudis and Emiratis activated got after they committed all those massacres, they were confronted by Yemeni armed forces and they were crushed. So there is no real possibilities of triggering any land invasion of Yemen. And so we will see continued just air attacks on Yemen that are ineffective because how tough the terrain of Yemen is. There's so many valleys and so many mountains. It's impossible to monitor everything from satellites or drones. Drones don't fly even over Yemen because so many were shot down by the Yemeni armed forces. And the intelligence on the ground of collaborationists is very weak in Yemen. There's social cohesion in the areas that the Sana'a government rules. So it's a losing war. They cannot win against Yemen. And we should expect over the next few weeks and months that Yemen's technologies that are being used to attack the Zionist colony will accelerate in their capabilities, because Yemen is just testing and testing and testing. Some of those weapons, we saw the developments of them being used by Iran after all those experiments by Yemen over the year before.
Laith, the case of Azerbaijan, it's something going on with Azerbaijan. They use Azerbaijan to attack Iran during 12 days of war between Iran and Israel. And then something happened between Azerbaijan and Russia, some sort of chaos. Do you see the case of Azerbaijan as something that we would hear in the near future more? And is it connected to what's going on in Syria, to what's going on in the Central Asia? Because they're talking about these Wahhabis and Salafis being connected by these countries. And how do you see the role of Azerbaijan in the whole situation?
Yeah, I mean, again, people should look at maps to understand these things. But Azerbaijan is a Turkic country, meaning they speak a language from the Turkic family of languages. But it's also mostly Shia. Okay, so there's this duality between identity. You have a lot of Azerbaijanis inside Iran, in the Azerbaijan province in Iran. They are the largest linguistic minority in Iran. And of course, Azerbaijan was part of the Soviet Union. So that's another layer that people need to understand. And what is really weird about the situation in Azerbaijan is that Aliyev, the current president, his father was the best friend of Hafiz al-Assad of Syria. Okay, they had a really good relationship. They were both Zionist. They were both very close to the Soviet Union and eventually Russia. And Aliyev, the father, was close to Iran also. And we just saw Al-Julani go to Baku. And although Al-Julani is destroying statues in Syria, especially for, as we saw, Druze, Alawi, Shia, and or their shrines of their martyrs and leaders, and including the shrine of Hafiz al-Assad, former president of Syria. Al-Julani went to the shrine and statue of Aliyev, the father, and bowed down and laid flowers, okay, in his time in Azerbaijan. So there's a lot of contradictions in Azerbaijan, which makes it always historically a contested space, right? So you have the Turkic, but Shia, Soviet, but also third worldist, and now Zionist and NATO. And so the contradictions, and that's something very common of what we would call border cultures, cultures that are between civilizations that are much bigger and have those, this is how geography and culture works. So what could be happening right now is that Iran and Russia, both of them, are getting a lot of negative effects of Aliyev's collaboration with Turkey and with NATO and with the Zionists. So we saw the effects on Armenia, and we are now beginning to see, as we saw, the effects on Iran, with the vast majority of all attacks on Iran coming from Azerbaijani airspace during the Zionist attack. So Iran has possibilities of being able to influence what's happening in Azerbaijan. So does Russia. But Iran is more careful than Russia with its attempts to influence anything in Azerbaijan, because it doesn't want to have its own Azerbaijani population feel any questions about how their own government in Iran is dealing with Azerbaijan. So while we would all like Iran to be more aggressive in its approach to Azerbaijan because of the collaboration with the Zionists. It is definitely not a smart thing to be confrontational with Azerbaijan. It has to be done in much more subtle ways. And what can I say? Our enemy has more maneuverability space in this situation.
Let's getting back to the meeting between Donald Trump and Netanyahu. They were talking about a humanitarian city in it's called a concentration camp in the southern part of Gaza in Rafah. Do you feel that this is somehow a decision based on the desperation that Netanyahu is feeling today, or they really see some sort of they can have some sort of arrangement to manage the situation, because so far they couldn't fight Hamas, they couldn't defeat Hamas. But how about moving all these more than 2 million people to the southern part, to a city, as they call it, I would say, a prison for all these people? Is that possible, or they're just making this out of desperation?
They will. What they're saying is that they're going to create this concentration camp with or without the Palestinians agreeing to it, and that anyone that will be found outside the borders of this concentration camp will be killed. So they are continuing in their genocidal practice. They're just finding more ways to justify it. And I would like everybody to, at the same time, remember that the United States is currently building its own concentration camps. So we saw that alligator Alcatraz in Florida, which they're jamming, I think 60 people into a cage that's opened up to all the weather, and it's in a swamp area that's an island that there's all alligators everywhere and the U.S. has already moved to creating its own concentration camps, extermination camps on its own territory. And there's going to be multiple of these all across the US, not only in Florida. So if it's normalized inside United States borders, we should expect it to be normalized in Gaza. Okay? There's nothing that's going to stop it from happening except the military defeat of the Israelis. So those talks about creating these concentration camps indicate that it's already in progress of building it. And the genocide of the Palestinian people will continue until the end of this war, either with the extermination of the Palestinian people and or the defeat of the Zionists. And of course, it's more likely that there will be a defeat of the Zionist colony than a total extermination of the Palestinian people. The internal cohesion of the Zionist colony is collapsing. Their military is at its weakest point in its history. Tens of their soldiers are killing themselves every week. All their elite units have been decimated. There's 18 years old fighting on the front lines, and they're having to even send their women on the front lines. Most of those Israeli women units, by the way, are all like desk units. There's not really many Israeli women that are in the front lines. But now they're having to push them in the front lines, just like Ukraine, because of the low grade of the new soldiers that are being taken into the Israeli military. And so we have the internal cohesion of the military of Israel and its political class, its financial influence, its global influence, all in retreat, and it's at their worst point in more than 100 years. Even the influence of the Zionists in the 1920s, 100 years ago, was stronger than their influence today in the streets of the Western capitals. So we're the Zionists are going to try to continue with wars. Their only solution, as they see it, to escape the inevitable collapse of the colony is to continue with mass extermination campaigns and wars against everybody around them. And how long can they keep that up? That's a question that the only people that can answer it are these, those who are fighting on the battlefield.
I think so far we can say that Israel is not militarily capable of fighting. I didn't see that much of leverage. Maybe they're using, as you've mentioned, so much these reservists and those people who are not much trained to fight. Because with the case of Lebanon, I remember they couldn't do anything. I think more than assassination, nothing could come out of the Israeli military. Most of them, they know how to use drones against people, but when it comes to the battlefield, it doesn't that much of a skill coming out of Israeli army. And they're so young. Do you, Laith, do you believe that the, because these people, we talk about Ukraine, and how the military machine, this sort of fight between Russia and Ukraine, has destroyed the youth of Ukraine. It seems that that case is happening to Israel as well. It's not just happening to the other side. Israel is suffering a lot in terms of their economy, their military, and nobody seems to talk about it. And everybody's when we talk about Israel, it seems that everything is somehow in favor of Israel, while the what's going on within Israel is something in terms of the immigration that is happening. The economy is not working. The military is not that much powerful. The image we had before October 7 and today, it's totally different image from Israel and Israeli power. And do you feel that would cause some sort of doubt in the mind of the Arab states in the region, or maybe Turkey, who are important, in my opinion?
Yeah, look, we know now from Jewish Zionist organizations in the UK that over the last 20 months, 5,000 at least Israeli soldiers were taken to the UK for treatment. Okay. So you could imagine how many were sent to the United States. If 5,000 were sent to the UK, it's very logical that many times that were sent to the US and Canada and Germany and so on. So they have very, very high injury rates that they're hiding. And having to survive a RPG or landmine explosion means you definitely are maimed. You have lost some limbs. So there's also a high crippled numbers of Israeli soldiers, permanently crippled. And we will not get the full numbers until they stop lying. And they're not going to stop lying about it until they are not in power anymore. And I think if they're all those mercenaries that the US and Canada and others that are sending, who are, by the way, right now in charge of the aid distribution, we're seeing every day Israeli, American, and Canadian soldiers or mercenaries shooting at the Palestinians that are coming to pick up some aid. So even those who are now demoralized, like you could imagine all of those Western mercenaries that were sent over the last 22 months to Palestine and getting their own defeats over and over, how these mercenary armies of the West are getting themselves also demoralized. And I think the situation is bad, maybe even worse than the Ukrainian military situation, the Israeli, because it's a small country, small population. Most of the Zionists in the West are big talkers. They're all cowards. They wouldn't go down and fight on the field. So yeah, we see a lot of gangsters in Brooklyn or in Toronto or Montreal picking up fights with women in the streets of those cities that are pro-Palestinian, but they will never go to the battlefield in Palestine. Very small numbers of them are going. And unfortunately, in terms of the Arabic countries in the Gulf and Turkey, we have to look at how, in the old days of slavery in the United States, when the slaves rebelled in the field and set the master's house on fire, you had the kitchen slave or the house slave that would fight back the field slaves and stay inside the house in the end, even when master leaves and runs away, stays inside the house as the house gets burned on top of them. That's the how loyal and house trained house slaves are historically. It's not something out of the blue. So I do not expect the Turkish leadership or the Arabian Peninsula collaborationist class to flip sides and go with the field slaves in their rebellion before the fall of the American control of the region and the fall of the Zionist colony, and most probably after the fall of the Zionist colony and the withdrawal of the US, those elite will fight on behalf of the US until they are burned with the house they're in. There's no change. There will be no change before that. It's the historical record tells us that, and otherwise, if we don't look at history, we'll just dream of things that can't happen.
Laith, before wrapping up, yesterday the EU Council failed to take a decision in dealing with the Israeli and their behavior in Gaza. When it comes to Ukraine, they're so much aggressive. They want to do everything. They want to buy weapons. They want to send them to Ukraine. They want to fight. There's so much. They're crying for Ukrainians. There's so much uh, hateful. They hate Russia because of what's going on in Ukraine. But when it comes to Gaza, when it comes to Palestine, you don't see anything. And how can we describe this sort of hypocrisy on the part of Europeans? And because I really believe that for the case of Ukraine, they're not capable of doing any sort of substantial changes in what's going on. But in the case of Palestine, they can do something toward the Israeli government. They can do something that help Palestinians and Gazans, but they're not doing it.
Yeah, all of Western Europe, specifically Anglo-Germanic, Latin countries with Greece, fell under American occupation at the end of World War II, and since then they have been vassals. And any attempt of these countries to escape that vassalhood, including the 1956 war, tripartite invasion by the British, French, and the Israelis of Egypt, just to prove the British and the French wanted to prove that they're not vassals after World War II. That was their last attempt at proving they're not vassals, and they got their neck snapped back by the U.S., who supported Egypt in 1956 just to teach the French and the English a lesson that they never will unlearn or forget. And clearly, the French and the British elite have not forgotten that lesson. They are, all of them are good collaborators of the American. They don't govern their own countries. There's more American soldiers on German soil than there is German soldiers. Those are all indicators of vassalhood. So I do not expect the European Union countries to either stop supplying weapons to Ukraine. In fact, paying for those weapons, as we see now, Trump has forced them to pay for the weapons that he's going to send to Ukraine, and they all said, yes, daddy, openly. I mean, it's crazy that the German chancellor would use those terms when talking about Trump, but that's the world we live in. And in terms of Palestine, there is countries like Spain that have a huge population that is anti-Zionist. The vast majority of Spaniards, no matter which region they're coming from in Spain, are against the Zionist colony for the liberation of Palestine. So their government, although it is also a vassal, has no choice but to differentiate its positionality on Palestine from the rest of the European countries. I say this in a sad way. I don't like the fact that the Spaniards are playing this game. Spain controls Gibraltar Strait, and they could very simply shut down Gibraltar Strait for any shipping to the Zionist colony that's bringing weapons from the US, Germany, and the UK, which is 99% almost of all weapons going to the Zionist colony are from the US, UK, and Germany. So they could do that, but they don't do it. Okay, we see how there is now the Hague Group meeting in Colombia, in Bogota, and that includes all these countries that speak and work on international law issues, like including South Africa and others. But what's going to happen if the Bogota Hague Group considers the Zionist government as war criminals? Can they do anything about it? No. But they can take action if they want to directly without talk by closing the Gibraltar Strait. And or Algeria and Tunis, who are also parts of this Hague Group right now, they also can shut down the Sicily Strait for any shipping going to the Zionist colony. Is the US going to go to war with Spain, Algeria, and Tunis to continue shipping weapons to the Zionist colony? No, it wouldn't. So why do we see all this talk? And I think it's unfortunately all to kind of manage the anger of the populations in those countries and diffuse them away from revolutionary action. Because if we know there is in Spain revolutionaries that are still active militarily, whether it's in the Basque Country or in Catalonia and or Andalusia regions, okay? And those people are like a hair's away from taking action, especially with these Zionists giving us the example of smuggling a few drones and firing from inside Iran and inside the Russia. So at any moment right now, a revolutionary in any of these coastal areas in Mediterranean can fly a few drones, hit a few ships going to Israel. Nobody can catch them. Nobody can stop them. The most impressive, intelligence agencies in the world cannot track stuff like this. So all it needs is for people in places like Spain, in places like Italy, in Algeria, in Tunis, to feel that there is no hope in any non-violent paths for this to happen. So we're just one hair away from that happening. And this theatric about the Hague Group and Spain fighting within the EU about Palestine is all just to avert that inevitable reality.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Laith, for being with us today. Great pleasure as always.
See you soon, Nima.
See you soon. Take care, Laith.